Generating generations, the impact of collective memory. I've always wondered about how memories unite us, how memories of events from decades before I was born unite me to the people around me and affect me even though I wasn't alive for them to. I always think of those memes on Instagram that say, only 90s kids will understand. But I was born a decade and a half later, and I understand just as much, right? Or how okay boomers used to shoot down antiquated ideas or people, but boomer in and of itself seems to be more a state of mind than it does an age thing. So I asked myself, what is it that ties us to things beyond our own lifetime? And the answer is, as you might have guessed, each other. Our relationship to one another, especially through our collective memories and our societal groups like communities, race, gender, or generation, tie us irrevocably to one another. The generation, in its theoretical basis, pioneered by German sociologist Karl Mannheim, groups people together born within the same 15 to 20 year range. These people grow up together, reach adulthood around the same time, go to each other's weddings, experience the same elections, movie stars, fashion trends, pop cultural events, political events, and social phenomena. That's where we get these notions of the 20s and 30s as the age of the speakeasies and jazz, the 50s as the rock and roll era of disillusionment, the 60s and 70s as a time of rebellion, peace sign waving and civil rights, and the 90s for grunge. So what's the problem with generations? They're useful. They help predict societal trends and views, they propel pop culture, and they unite and divide us in significant ways. Despite their importance, however, they're decided primarily by popular consensus, except for the baby boomer generation, which was decided by the US Census Bureau. But that's where collective memory saves the day. Collective memory is the phenomena in which individuals use memories, consciously or subconsciously, to create a communal reservoir of relevant stories of the past, present, and future. Collective memory is reliant not on your proximity in time or space to a significant event. It's reliant on your relationship to the collective in question. And that's why 9/11 or apartheid impacted me as a 16-year-old, even though I wasn't alive to see them. My relationship to the collective of the American public, or to a minority group, tie me to these events, even though they didn't affect my lifetime specifically. Collective memory and generations are related in that they both unite people into social groups, are fueled by historical and pop cultural events, and impact identity formation. Therefore, collective memory can be used to strengthen our generations as we know them today. So, how do we do that? I did extensive research identifying significant pop cultural and historical phenomena in the US. Using Billboard's top 100 records for each decade, the highest grossing movie of each decade, and the most popular food trends of each decade, I determined pop cultural feats that impacted the most people. In the same stead, using things like Pew Research Center's list of the most significant events in Americans' lifetime, I identified similar national and global phenomena. Then, I developed a survey asking about people's personal relationship to each event, posing the question, how significant were these historical or pop cultural events on the formation of your personal identity? Then allowing respondents to determine the identity significance on a scale of 1 to 5, from things like Beyonce's music to Hurricane Katrina. Each generation had an even number of events, pop cultural and historical, so that all respondents had an equal chance of answering. The survey was distributed to high schools, middle schools, college campuses, senior citizen centers, workplaces, and through social media. A total of 312 responses were collected. Then the data was cleaned, adjusted for fair gender, racial, and age representation, then analyzed and visualized. This is what I found. Respondents most often voted within generational lines. However, they did so within groups of approximately 5 to 15 years. The little circles show how individuals most often voted together, and the blue lines mark current generations as we know them. You can see how respondents voted in smaller groups smaller than their generation. In the instance of the biggest events, such as 9/11, there was the largest presence of high identity formational impact. Gen Z, of course, was the most varied, which makes sense because they're the least solidified. But most significantly, collective memories unite individuals into sub-generational groups. We are most related in smaller, time-based cohorts that, when added back together, create the generations we know and love today. These ranges are 1951 to 65, 1966 to 70, 1971 to 80, 1981 to 85, 1985 to 95, 1996 to 2005, and 2005 to present. So, what does this mean for us? What are the implications of this research? This research can allow for more accurate sociological research, more accurately defining societal trends and political views. Terms like "okay boomer" could perhaps be more accurate, or even deemed obsolete, as we see that sub-generational groups are more important. We could even adopt these new generations into everyday life. The Riveters, named for the changes of World War II, the Beat generation, named for the conformity and the pushback in the 50s, the activist age for the protests of the 60s and 70s, the Skywalkers for the space race and Star Wars, of course, the Reds for the Cold War, the housing bubblers for the impacts of the Great Recession of 2008, Generation Zero, nodding to the new millennium and Ground Zero of 9/11, and the quarantines for the coronavirus. My personal favorite. This data could provide us more information of things like distinctive youth cultures, trends, or other societal phenomena. It can make census data that allocates resources to communities more accurate or strengthen the work of organizations like the Pew Research Center. In the end, this research shows us that we're more united than we could ever know, and that the borders we create for ourselves are easily broken down.